Hey Matrix, welcome to your next section of work. We're now going to start on the reproductive strategies in animals because now we're finished in plants. So now I'm going to just teach you from the beginning, so how you attract a mate, how fertilization occurs. After we're going to do fertilization, it's how the developing embryo or how it is actually develops, whether it's in an egg or live birth. And then we're going to deal with parental care and then when those numbers become too high. So it's a little bit of population ecology, reproduction, a whole mixture of a whole bunch of things. Okay, so let's begin this new section of work. So, as we know, the reproduction is a biological process during which a new individual or individuals originate from an already existing individual. Okay, so that's part of a very complex definition. I recommend you learn that. During reproduction, an organism's genes are transferred to the next generation, and this is essential for the survival and evolution of a particular species. So remember that if I keep on pushing over, sending my genes down, I will eventually continue my entire lineage. And if I've got some good genetics or different genetics that help me survive better, I will be a fitter individual, and that would allow for evolution. So just reminding you, so we have asexual reproduction, where only one parent is involved. All offspring are genetically identical to the parent. What I recommend you go and do is Google something called Parthenogenesis. So that is where bees actually produce where bees produce individuals of themselves, but they are actually haploid individuals, and they don't actually have. So hello to Nova, look. Those individuals only have half the set of chromosomes. And the queen bee actually keeps it that way. Otherwise, they'd all be fighting to reproduce. Then we have sexual reproduction, where two parents are involved. Offspring are genetically different. Remember, this is from the process of meiosis. From each other as well as either of the two parents. So, animals need to reproduce effectively and successfully in various environments. So how do they achieve this? We're going to look at external and internal fertilization, ovipary, ovovivipary, and vivipary. The amniotic egg, precocial and atraceal development, and finally parental care. By the end of this lesson, we'll just get to the amniotic egg. We'll then do precocial and atraceal development, parental care, and survival strategies next. So let's have a look at some courtship over here. So different animals court each other in very weird and wonderful ways. So we'll start with peacocks and we'll work our way down from there. So we've got peacocks. They have those beautiful feathers. Now remember that they're sexually dimorphic, which means that the males and females do not look the same. So to a large extent, the male peacock's bright feathers actually are a secondary sexual characteristic. And this indicates to a female that they are the best developed and best growing. Which means that they should be the ones that they should mate with, because the next generation should potentially also have lovely big feathers like that, which ultimately means that they are going to be able to have more kids. Then we have the Adlai Penguins. They are the females are gold dingers. So ultimately what happens is the males present the female with a pebble. And it's not necessarily what the pebble looks like and how beautiful and or smooth it is, but it's more about how it is just used to create nests, because they make nests out of these pebbles. Then we got like little girls there as well. We can also realize that humans do a lot of courtship. You know, it's taking out for dinners, it's buying gifts, flowers, making food. It's just to prove that you are the perfect mate. Then we got hanging fly with regifters. So what they actually do is those hanging flies offer a insect as food to a female, and then the female rocks up and either takes it, and if the male is not actually good at, well, they'll mate because of how the male places it. If she doesn't want the sperm, she can just push it out, much like dragonflies do. Dragonflies can actually, when the sperm package is placed inside of them and they find a stronger male, they can actually push out the previous sperm package and take on the new stronger males. Finally, and this is quite crazy, we have the sea slugs, and they fence with their penises. Yep, they actually fence with their penises, and whichever sea slug wins the other male turns female, which means that they are hermaphrodites, or they can actually change between male and female, and fertilization occurs in the now new trans female sea slug. So let's have a look at external fertilization. This is the fusion of egg and sperm outside of the female's body. So you can imagine that if you're going to be pushing out all of your sperm and your eggs outside of the body, there's a high risk that a lot of it's going to get lost or eaten or just damaged. So you need to produce a large number of offspring that are produced. The fusion on egg or sperm are completely left to chance. So a lot of the times, like fish, the males will just swim over the female eggs, and hopefully fertilization will occur as they ejaculate their sperm over the entire structure. A lot of things that live in the ocean are, well, like 90% of them are all external fertilized. There are, however, environmental hazards such as predators, large reduced number of offspring, because they get eaten. Because, I mean, remember, these things are nutritious. Like, as they're starting to develop, I mean, we eat chicken eggs. So, if we were in the ocean, there was chicken eggs, we'd probably eat them if we were, So, there's a whole bunch of other predators that want to eat the eggs. Then finally, water requires external fertilization. You can't kind of have internal fertilization because there's too much water in the environment, and then the sperm might be washed out. Alright, so there's just two examples for you. So the male fish waits to spread his sperm over the eggs, and then we have female and male frogs. You note that the male frog is a lot smaller than the female in this particular species, and the sperm and egg are released into the water. Then we have internal fertilization, which is the fusion of eggs and sperm, which occurs inside of the female body. So internal fertilization occurs in nearly all terrestrial or land animals. So you can imagine that anything that lives in the ocean is kind of deemed as less evolved, because anything that ended up on land kind of went into a different direction, and those land or terrestrial animals then started having to produce proper eggs. We'll get to that later. So the male generally has a penis or other structure that delivers sperm into the female's genital tract. Few sperm or eggs are produced as they are more protected. Remember that you're not just pushing out sperm and eggs onto the floor. It's a very guided and specific process where the sperm has to swim up a set of tubes, and then it will eventually find the sperm. A lot of this is left up to chance as well, and that's why the male still produces a lot of sperm, especially in humans, but very few eggs are actually produced. And if anything, and you want to know about like other animals, please remember that like a dog that has multiple puppies, or a rabbit, or a rabbits and dogs, or anyway, cats, the same thing. They actually hold onto a whole bunch of eggs, and after they've held onto them, they then get ready for fertilization, and then that's when they have multiple kids. So it increases the chances of successful fertilization by having internal fertilization. So another example would be humans. So there's the little sperm, and they're finding an egg. This isn't just necessarily human, it could be a whole bunch of other land animals. Alright, now, once fertilization has occurred, we now need to find a structure for that developing embryo to start developing inside, okay? And we'll get to the nitty-gritties of like when we call what. So, like fertilized egg, embryo, fetus, so on and so forth. We'll get to that a little bit later. So, in ovipary, and please note that the O there like kind of looks like an egg, so that's how you remember that ovipary is eggs. All right, and this is you birth, but you're birthed into an egg. Okay, so eggs are laid, the embryos develop outside the mother's body. Most invertebrates and many vertebrates reproduce this way. I'm sure you can think of a couple. Your reptiles, your birds, or aves for that matter. Amphibians, no, sorry, they're in the water. I'm trying to think. Oh, and there's some mammals. Okay, so little to no development occurs inside the mother's body. So fertilization occurs, the eggs start developing. Once the eggs are ready, the female then lays the eggs, and then she hopes for the best. Now, it depends on the species whether those eggs will be looked after by the parent, like there'll be parental care to the eggs themselves, or the eggs are just left. To a large extent, large reptiles like crocodiles, there is not a lot of chance of parental care that's actually going to occur. All right, so ovipary, usually fertilized eggs are supplied with yolk, which which provides the embryo with carbohydrates and fats. Please highlight that; that's really important. And then we have the albumin or the egg white, which supplies the embryo with protein as well as water. So remember that the cell itself is so flimsy that you need to be able to still keep it moist to a large extent. So that's why that albumin is going to hold onto a lot of water. And think of gelatin or jelly that you eat. I mean, jelly is really chock-a-block full of water. Nova. All right. So yeah, and that's the part that we like to eat as well. That's why a lot of people, if they want to lose weight, they only eat the egg white and not the egg yolk because of all the fat and carbohydrate. All right, so let's look at ovipary again. The advantages and disadvantages. So advantages, there are many eggs that can be laid. Each one is capable of developing with little to no parental care. Remember, they just need to be put in the correct environments for this whole thing to go place. The disadvantages are once eggs are laid, they're exposed to predators and poor environmental conditions. So the top right hand corner over there, I've put an arrow towards it. And you can see that it's talking about the sex ratio or the percentage of males and the temperature. So this is called TSD or temperature dependent sex determination. And what happens here is they're showing 3 different types of reptiles and at what temperatures you are going to find maximum amount of males. So if a clutch of eggs is in a very, 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 very cold temperature comparatively, so let's say for the alligator over there, if the temperature is 29 degrees constantly for the entire situation while they're developing, all of them will be female, or majority of them will be female. If the temperature gets closer to about 32 to about 33 degrees Celsius, majority of them are going to be female, and then slowly but surely it will be male, and then slowly surely descend back into female. Each species has a different version of this as well, and it's just important for you guys to just know this exists. So we are used to like, oh, you know, you have an X gene or XX and XY. It doesn't work in these type of animals. They literally depend on the temperature, and there's other types of animals that also, like some fish, which develop based on pH, whether they're male or female. Some is like the how dense, like how close the population is itself, which will change whether they are male or female. All right, then we have vivipary. This is us. Fetus is retained in the mother's uterus, nourished through the umbilical cord. Eggs are fertilized internally, and this occurs in most mammals. The uterus and placenta help protect and nourish the embryo. So please note in this instance that there is a direct connection to the mother, right? And that is going to allow for all those nutrients to like 100% just get pushed in over there. Whereas with an egg, you note that there is no connection to the mother because they've been pushed into an egg and they've been moved out of the system as a whole. All right, so let's look at the advantages. It's increased in chance of the offspring being produced. Remember that this is also going to, vivipary is live birth. So like the child develops inside of the uterus connected to a placenta, and then from there, once it is developed enough or it can survive outside of the body, that is when it is pushed out of the system. Young are fairly well developed when they're born, only in certain species, and we'll talk about atracele and precocial a little bit later. And often parental care is offered to the offspring, which increases their chances of survival. All right, so with vivipary, a lot of the time there is a large amount of parental care. Obviously, depending on the species. I mean, if we're talking about a human, there's a lot of parental care, whereas if there is, or like let's say a springbok, there's still parental care, but not nearly as much because it's extremely well developed. And then let's also just talk about a disadvantage of this. I know it sounds really crazy, but it's almost like you are a parasite to your mom, so you are literally sucking out all of your mother's nutrients. And please note that a lot of females have to take a large amount of calcium while they're developing, so that one, the child can have enough calcium to actually develop its bones, and number two, that your bones act as a well for calcium, so that while the child is developing and your body you're not eating enough calcium, it can actually take calcium from your bones and deposit into itself. So your body wants to rather make sure that your baby survives as opposed to the actual individual itself. Then we have the craziest one of the lot, and we have ovoviviparity. So ovoviviparity is where the young develop from eggs retained in the mother's body. So fertilization occurs in there. An egg develops inside, but the egg continues to grow while the child develops inside of the mother itself. Okay, so she'll have like a uterus kind of sac, and everything will develop inside of there. When the child has then has developed enough, it will break out of its egg, and then live birth will occur. So separated from egg by membranes, the egg contains nourishing yolk. There's no connection between mother and offspring for nourishment. Developing embryos kept in the mother's body until they are ready to hatch and they are born live. How cool is that? And I recommend you go and Google something called mermaid's purse or shark egg, and you'll see they've got these wild, various different kinds of shapes. It's quite cool. Then we have the advantages. So developing embryos protected inside the mother's body, and the hatchlings are generally self-sufficient. To a large extent, we find that in some sharks, they even have moments where the shark that hatches first will actually fight off. They'll try and eat the other sharks in the womb. If there are two sharks that hatch at the same time, they will fight to the death inside the mother's womb. And then pretty much only one survives. Alrighty, so let's have a look at this amniotic egg. So we've spoken about how we can develop. Let's look at this amniotic egg. So it says reptiles, birds, and some mammals. So you guys have all heard of a, it's gone now, platypus. All right, and then on top of it, go and search echidna. I think they call them merostomes or something. They all are mammals but produce an egg as well. This is the interior view of the bird. This is a very, it looks complex, but I actually don't want you to learn either of these. This is just to show you what it actually looks like. So fish and amphibians need water for fertilization and for the development of their eggs, whereas early reptiles were the first vertebrates that through evolution colonize habitats on land. They develop eggs known as amniotic eggs, which can survive. So this is so important. This comes up all the time, absolutely all the time. So after fertilization, these eggs develop extra embryonic membranes filled with fluid, the amnion, and this is what surrounds the embryo, and it is fluid filled for protection. So if the eggs get moved, there's not a chance that it's going to hit that outer shell, which is made out of extremely strong calcium. The allantois, I still don't know how to pronounce it, so if you've got a better pronunciation, grows from the embryo and collects waste. The chorion, the outermost membrane, and this is for gas exchange. So please also remember that the shell has micro holes in it, which allows for air or oxygen and gases to move in and out constantly, so that gaseous exchange can still occur. Remember that the embryo itself still does need oxygen to allow itself to go through the process of cellular respiration. So the chorion is going to allow for this gas exchange to occur, and it's going to allow and it's actually going to choose which gases it should be allowed in and which ones should not. Finally, we have the yolk sac and the albumin, which provide nutrients. Remember, the yolk sac is carbohydrates and carbohydrates and fats, whereas the albumin is proteins and water. So let's look at the advantages of this. It prevents dehydration of the embryo, provides nutrients, water, and oxygen to the embryo. It also removes waste products. Remember, the allantois does that. And then finally, the calcareous shell or calcium-infused shell allows gas exchange as well as protection. Okay, so this is just a maybe slightly better view of it. So we have an airspace over there, which also allows for a bit of protection inside, also helps with gas exchange. Then we have the allantois, which is the bit that, collects all the waste products. We have the chorion for gas exchange. We have the embryo developing. We have the amnion, which is a fluid-filled space around it. The albumin, yolk sac, and eggshell, finally. So what I recommend is please draw this and put a huge important on it. It is really important, ladies. So that's the end of this. In the next episode, I'll get to the rest, and I hope you're having a phenomenal day. Look after yourself. Cheers.